and we can get started. I don't know how much we're actually going to be able to get done. The previous meeting, I'll just quickly go through that and see if there's any actions that aren't on the agenda. So I think everything in there is on the agenda or closed. So I'll just jump into the agenda. I think the first thing, I don't know how much we're going to get done with this, is this 13254, which is integrate C++ async hooks and better API with native abstraction. I know that Ali's been doing some PRs around that. He's not here today. Let's see. If he has a PR to the NAND stuff and it is merged as of 9 days ago. So I think next time we'll have to come back on this and see what's left to do here. And if this thing can be closed. Anybody have anything to add with that?
It's awesome that it's closed or merged the PR.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay, so the working group meeting times, this is issue number 158. This came up. I was tempted to just kind of move this meeting this week, but I did want to just give people a chance to chime in here on the call. There's two proposals. One is 9 a.m. PST, 5 p.m. GMT, and the other is 11 a.m. PST, 7 p.m. GMT. That seemed to work for, I think, most people that chimed in on the issue. It does have some periodic conflicts with TSC meetings. At least the 9 a.m. one does, and the 11 a.m. meeting has a periodic conflict with the moderation committee meeting. I'm tempted to just, say we're going to have this thing at 11 a.m. PST, 7 p.m. GMT, and do that going forward. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? Does that not work for anyone?
I think the people that may be affected by this might not be in this call.
Yeah, and they're the ones who sort of propose these times. I think. Let me see.
I don't think it's a decision we can really make in this call. We kind of have to make it an issue where people can chime in asynchronously.
So the issue's been open. So there is an issue. It's issue 158. I think for people did chime in there. I think Yang said that he would prefer 7 p.m. GMT. I think at the summit, several people said 5 p.m. GMT. The other comments on here were basically silence, and Michael Dawson saying both times work for me, provided there are no conflicts with other working group meetings. So, we know now that this one doesn't work for everyone. The other alternative is we alternate bi-weekly. That feels a little more complicated schedule-wise. And I prefer to avoid it, but we can do it. I think, Stephen, to your point, we don't have to make a final decision now, but we should. I'd like to be able to say something decisive, like, hey, we're going to, move this to 11 p.m. Here's the issue. It conflicts with the moderation committee, and if somebody has concerns, please speak up. But we'll try and address it.
11 a.m. right? You keep saying p.m.
Did I say p.m.? Sorry, 11 a.m. 11 a.m. PST, 7 p.m. GMT. So that we'll say something definitive and let people chime in. I think the issue's been open though, so for people to, to tell us. So I don't think it's we're doing it in a vacuum. But tell me if I'm missing something, or you were thinking something else, Stephen.
Well, the issue right now is just like a bunch of suggestions of possible times. We should just pick one and like post in that issue. Like, we will go with this one unless there are objections in X amount of time.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
And then have people do up and down votes to that comment or something.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so then nobody here is concerned about moderation committee conflicts or anything as of now.
I'm not sure who have that conflict. Like who in our group is on that moderation committee.
Yeah, I honestly don't know, and I think Michael Dawson was the only one who was like conflicting with other working group meetings. So,
and Forrest as well, it seems.
I think he's the only one on the moderation team that's in. It's technically in the Diagnostics working group still. A bunch of us obviously have conflicts with the TSC meeting when that rotates every 3 weeks. If you were to go for the 9 a.m. PST spot.
Yeah, I figured that, so that's why I avoided that. And I thought the moderation committee would be less contentious, but I'm not aware of actually who's on that. But you're saying it's just one person who is that?
I think so. I think just Forrest is, and I'm not sure if he's been around the diagnostic side of thing much these days anyways.
Yeah, I haven't.
We meet every other week, right?
Yeah.
So that means it's only like every 6 weeks that we actually run into a conflict with the TSC meeting anyways.
I didn't actually go through and look.
One every.
That's about right.
Not every 6 weeks. Every 6th meeting, which is like 12 weeks.
Is it every 6 meetings? Why would it be every 6 meetings?
Because we're every other week. It rotates every week through 3 time slots.
Oh, I see.
That means it's every 6 meetings for us that it actually conflicts.
So what about the moderation? How frequently does that meet? Does anybody know? Once a month, maybe?
Either every other week or monthly, one of the two.
I think it's monthly. It looks monthly.
But what about other days? Is there a better day for people?
I mean, there is. I mean, I suppose we can consider it. I was hoping to just try and find something. Yeah, I mean, we can certainly consider it, right? But I kind of get the sense that it's like the moderation committee is not. I mean, if they're meeting once a month and it's like we're meeting bi-weekly, it's like, I mean, somebody can do the math. We wouldn't have had a conflict this week or this month.
The conflict would be uncommon.
Yeah, I kind of feel like it would be uncommon, but it would happen occasionally, depending on how the calendars fall. Okay, so let me do this. I'm going to say, we move this to 11 a.m. PST, let people do an up or down vote on that issue. And, with the caveat that if there is a conflict with the moderation committee, it's going to happen, quote, infrequently. And if somebody's really concerned about it, somebody can dig in and do the math. Does that sound fair?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Okay. So moving on. Where is it?
I guess, is the deep dive meeting on the CI testing to ensure tools compatibility.
Yeah, so I think the general thing here is that it was expressed that rather than just pulsing on the the open issues and going into detail on that we periodically wanted to do deep dives on specific topics, and do that for an hour. I think somebody mentioned 2 hours. I think to start on things that we would do, say, an hour and see how things go, and we would try this every other meeting. How do people feel about that?
Okay.
Does anybody think that's too much?
Sounds good.
Too little?
We will see.
Okay, so I'll open another issue, just basically saying like we're going to periodically do deep dives, let people chime in on that, see if there's any sort of concerns around it. And then there's a specific thing here for the deep dive with CI testing. Who was the one that was driving that bit at?
I think it was me who bring this up regarding the CPU profiling, that we should have first-class citizen tools that are tested against the releases. But we didn't really agree in anything on the summit because at this moment we are not sure that what are the first-class citizen tools. So I think in the first round we should come up with a list.
So is it even at a point where we can do a deep dive on it, or would that just be?
I don't know. We should find a way to determine the first-class citizen tools, but I don't know what's the best way for that.
I think before the deep dive, we should list all the tools we have today and the tools we want to have, to then be able to determine which would the tier for each one of them.
Yeah, and I am not sure, but I think it was Joy who told that she is willing to collect the tools, but I am not sure.
I think it was her, yeah.
Okay, so if I'm hearing right, it's like there's the feeling that we don't quite yet have the set of information that we need before we can go off and do a deep dive. There's some preliminary stuff that needs to happen, in particular the stuff listed in these bullets on this issue 156. Okay.
I agree.
Okay. And then in general, the ability to, or the process of having like these periodic deep dive talks, I'll post an issue on that. I think one of the things that came up was async context tracking, or the async context model that we've been talking about. And I think that's sort of at least at a level of, definition that we can have conversations about it. So I think that's a good candidate for these things. I think what I can do is post an issue saying that, hey, we want to get a list of candidate things to do deep dives on. We'll schedule these things in periodically. People can join. We'll adjust timing as we learn more about how things go, and people can thumbs up or thumbs down that. Does that sound fair?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, moving on. So CPU profiling roadmap number 148.
Yes. Today we had a meeting with V8 about the specific interface that's required. Matthias, do you want to share the context? You have more knowledge about the field.
Sure. Basically, we talked with Yang and Frenzy about the possibility to have a code event listener API, which gives us the ability to map symbols from external profilers, and also about the V8 CPU profiler, which today only is able to sample JavaScript frames, but maybe in the future we can work with on that to collect also native frames. Regarding the external profilers and the problem they have with interpreted frames, I have a prototype that I worked on for the past few weeks, which is able to collect the interpreted frames. But it has a very heavy overhead right now because I had to disable optimizations. So I'm doing some experiments to fix that. And I think that's it, basically.
Yeah, what we discussed on the summit, just to summarize it, that basically this event listener library will be an npm package, which will be part of the diagnostic tools, and we will move it under the Node.js organization, and there will be CI provided for that. And other than that, today there was a conversation about that, where should be the testing take place for this. And the V8 team recommended to do the testing on Node, like an integration kind of test, that it's working from our side. Would you be okay with this one?
I think so. I think it could be on Canary in the Goldmine. It doesn't have to run for every pull request, but it should run for every V8 update.
Is it something that if someone is from the TSC side or diagnostic group side would be okay with this solution?
I don't see any reason not to be okay with it. So just so I understand correctly, what the proposal is that there is a standalone module that knows how to fire events that have necessary information to fill in the details about the stack frames, and in particular interpreted stack frames. Is that correct understanding?
Yes. Today for optimized stack frames, it already works. It doesn't work for interpreted frames only. And so for inline optimized functions, but that's another issue.
So you have all of the necessary information to sort of accurately decorate call stacks, right, for JITted stack frames without this additional library that's going to fire these code events.
Yeah, today you can do that using the first basic prof flag. Okay.
And then the interpreter stack frames is just missing altogether, but that's a separate thing to fix those.
Yeah, they are missing because on the stack frame, the only thing that appears is the interpreter.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. And then so the proposal is then this library that takes whatever basic prof is spitting out and converts it into a more standard form is going to get written, submitted into Node.js, run some tests as part of that so that it does not break and people can rely on it.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. That sounds.
And this is also a more cross-platform solution from virtual machine point of view. So if later the Chakra team would like to emit the same events, then it's also possible.
Yeah, like what I would assume is that we would just update this library to have a different adapter for whatever, proprietary format.
Yep.
We're spitting out, and then it would produce the same set of events.
Okay.
So I think that works. Okay. Hey, Michael.
Hello.
Hi. Is it the Moscow Center?
Sorry, what's that?
Sorry, nothing. Is it the Moscow Center in the background?
That's where I am, yep.
Sorry for the off topic.
So Michael, we discussed the timing of this. I think the proposal is to move the timing of the meeting to 11 a.m. And then there's a periodic but infrequent conflict with the moderation committee meeting. And we're going to put this up in an issue, let people vote up or down. I don't know if you wanted to chime in on that. Yeah, I think it was like, as long as it doesn't conflict with other things.
Yep. No, sounds good to me.
Okay, great. So it sounds like there's some progress on the perf thing. Okay, so moving on. So number 134, eliminate monkey patching for diagnostic instrumentation. I'm not aware of any progress that's happened on there. I think the end result of this one after the meeting or the summit was that we would start a new code base somewhere under the the Node organization, and we would start building stuff out there rather than using the existing diagnostic source module. I don't know that anybody's moved on that. And Thomas or Stephen, I don't know if you guys have an update, or I'm seeing Daniel or anyone from Dynatrace.
I have no update. No.
We should have anyone that wants to be involved in that too. Just like we have another async meeting. Just get the ball rolling on it.
So sorry, you're suggesting we have another meeting to just kick that off?
Or something like that. Just like, to decide like who's doing what and when.
Okay.
Like we've kind of decided that, like, this is a thing we should do, but haven't made any decision on how to actually proceed yet.
Yeah, so probably ping people in the issue and just to get it started, and then set up a meeting based on when people who are interested can join.
Does somebody want to take that action and see if they can move it forward?
I'm happy to. Oops. Maybe I'm unmuted. Okay, I'm happy to volunteer, although I won't do anything until next week.
Okay.
And I think my current understanding, just so I don't get it wrong, is it's not focused on monkey patching specifically, but looking at a diagnostic channel implementation that we're going to move forward with.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that there's an idea of how a pub submodel can sort of obviate the need for a number of cases where monkey patching is currently being used. And that if we have the pub sub infrastructure, we can monkey patch to get the publication of data in there in the short term, and then we can open PRs on libraries to eliminate the monkey patching in the long term. So I think it's a path on how we get out of monkey patching.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, that's what I understood you did in the diagnostic channel, right?
It is, and there's this sort of, and I get it. Like, I don't know, like if I hadn't looked at the code, and I'd maybe be saying the same thing, but there's what we believe is a good start for that, and I think Ali and some others have mentioned, well, we should just start fresh. And if people want to start fresh, that's great. I don't know that I personally think that's the best approach, but I'm fine with that if that's what people want.
Yeah, I'll propose. We'll see if people agree or not. Like, I think we should actually start by a deep dive into the existing implementation, not necessarily saying we're starting with that, but at least have you take us through it or whatever, so that we at least can take the like some inspiration from that, even if at the end we say let's start from fresh. If you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'll suggest that along as when I put together an issue to move that forward and ping people and stuff, maybe suggest a few steps. And that was one I think we should include along the way.
Okay, that sounds fair.
Okay.
And just to clear up my my thoughts here, is this only for third-party modules, or is it also for some parts of Node Core that we want to do this pops up?
Well, I mean, I would say that ultimately it should be some parts of Node Core. Now, I don't think Node Core can take a dependency on, some module that's outside of Node Core. So I think the first thing is to kind of get, people in agreement that, this API is the right API and this thing is doing what it's supposed to be doing and everybody's happy with it. And then you can talk about, well, we want to use this in Node Core. How would we make it available? And then it's a conversation about does this pub sub channel need to be part of Node Core? Then people can take depths on it. And I kind of feel like
so this is like also proving. This is a proof of concept. We make in user land to see how that this works. Kind of like in a way, like readable stream was also a module done that a lot of that was done in user land to see how that would work.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you could start by saying this should be part of Node Core, but I feel like that might be a little premature. If somebody thinks there's a fair argument to be made about why it should just immediately start there, then I'm all for that. I kind of feel like it would be a easier argument to make when it's like, hey, look, we've got this thing. We've got, it does what it's supposed to be doing, and, we've got buy-in in module space that it should then migrate over.
It sounds good.
Yeah, I definitely agree that making it much more concrete in terms of like, here's a PR that pretty much is what it's going to look like, as opposed to trying to get little bits and pieces, is going to be a better way. So to work on it separately, get it to a good state, and then consider that is what I'd recommend too.
Sounds good. I just wanted to, make sure we were on the same page.
Yeah, and the other way to think about this, and this is, I'll throw it out there just so people chew on it, right? But like, I think it was brought up that there's sometimes people want to go in and they want to do some mutations on objects, like, for example, adding headers, wrapping, callbacks, things like that, right? And that's one class of operations that are happening. I think the other class of operations that are happening is just, sending data through, right? That is like, I don't know, something took some amount of time or something like that, right? In terms of what's in Node Core, like, is it possible, and I know that we discussed this at the summit, but is it possible to use the trace events macros to sort of fire some of that data, right? Because that's already in Node Core, and then can you somehow have that stuff, surface potentially through this pub subsystem, right? Maybe a thing like that lets you actually fire some of data through, fire some data through or from Node Core without having to get this pub sub model in there, and lets you address some of those concerns. And I know there was some pushback on this thing actually using the trace event stuff. I'm not totally convinced. I think there's some cases where the trace events doesn't make sense. I think there's some cases where it may. I could be wrong, but that's the other thing to just kind of think about and see if it makes sense for people or not. So. Okay, so Michael, so you'll ping on that issue with some steps to go forward.
Yep.
Great. Okay, so moving on. So async hooks. Andreas is not here. Ali's not here. I don't know that any progress has been made on this. Does anybody have any updates for that? It's issue 124. Okay, moving on. So the summit, issue 121, can we close this issue or?
I think we can. The issue where I'm sort of thinking we'll track the stuff is the one that I opened for recap. So I think we could close that as done.
Okay, I will close it then. Or do you want to close it, Michael?
No, go ahead.
It's closed. Nice. Thanks everyone, by the way, for showing up, and thanks Michael for organizing all of that.
Yeah, no, I quite enjoyed it. So
yeah. Okay, so async, context, formalization, and diagnostic support. So not much has happened here since the summit. I was just talking with Mark about some of this stuff. I think we've got at least a path in my mind about how we can build a monkey patch system to kind of generate the events for this model that would work on down-level revs of Node. And I think we have a path that lets us build this graph. And then so I think the question is can I find some time to actually write the code to do that? And then get it in people's hands and let people say, like, you guys are crazy, or this makes some sense. And so I think that's kind of the next thing there. I think some of the discussions that we had at the summit were good and sort of clarifying some confusion points that people had. So we need to update some of the text, I think, in some of the in the doc around that. And then the other bit there is I think this is a good candidate for doing the deep dives that we talked about as we discussed earlier. So and happy to do that at any time anyone wants.
What just sorry, because I probably should know, but not in the loop. When you say write some code, what is that code going to do?
Well, we had a intern here a few years back who went through Node and identified every place that there is in the Node libraries that there is an asynchronous continuation point. That is fs.read, and you pass it
right.
Something, okay. Right? So what we can do is we can have, so it's a big data file, right? And so we can use that to basically monkey patch all these places where we want to be able to generate these events that build this, that'll let us build this graph. So okay. The code would leverage this thing to monkey patch the hell out of Node such that we can generate these, link event and cause events and, the appropriate begin and end execution of it.
A bit like async hooks on steroids?
I wouldn't say it's like async hooks, because async hooks is operating at like the handle level, right? Like you've got these low-level resources and native code, and they're going through their lifecycle events, and as they go through the lifecycle events, it's firing events back into JavaScript, right?
Okay.
So what we're doing is we're just going to monkey patch things to generate this sort of event stream that we talk about in that doc, right?
Okay. I'll wait to see it, but I was just curious.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the question is going to be, the hope is that what it helps do is it helps sort of cement the model that we're talking about and cement the fact that it's useful, and then sort of provide a building block upon which somebody could go off and implement, different, I don't know, some of the different use cases for understanding these events, right? So you could implement continuation local storage, you could implement, the long stack trace. That's sort of the goal, right? And then also that, there's a way then to tie, like ultimately tie user code back to, this model, so that when somebody is actually looking at their JavaScript code, they can have an intuitive sense about the asynchronous nature of it. It's a bit of a longer stretch, just because there's limited syntactic constructs to convey that information, but you know, I think it's ultimately where we need to be, right? Like, but yeah. So, any questions about this at all? Okay. Trace event. I know that there's been some stuff that's going on with a number of things in here. Not all of those issues are on our agenda. I know that James opened some, has a small PR around some of the APIs in JavaScript land. I saw that there's an issue open around like, hey, we've got dtrace and we've got LTTNG, and you know, we want ETW and we've got trace event, and what are we going to do? Anybody have any comments here on this?
I'll just echo that. Yeah, I've seen that's probably our immediate next steps on this front. So, and I've seen it started to happen. So it's happened. So that's good.
Okay. Okay. That is everything for our agenda, I think, unless I missed something.
I think there is one, if I'm reading it correct, with the perf benchmarking thing.
Oh, yeah. Let's see. Sorry, I missed that one.
I think that one is probably worth, I don't know, it needs a link, if nothing else, to the work that is being started on the CPU profiling.
Yeah, I think it can be removed from the Diagnostics agenda, because
Yeah,
it's basically a subset of the CPU profiler roadmap.
I mean, maybe if you can just paste a link in there saying, you know, this is being covered under this issue, wherever you're tracking the CPU profile. I guess the one for the CPU profiling, unless you've already done that.
Can we just close this thing right now? Like, I mean, it sounds like...
I would think that we're okay actually putting the link in there saying we're covering under this and then closing it.
Yeah.
Because there's no point tracking like two different places, and I don't think there's that much more value having it in the benchmarking side versus the it's just that that's where the discussion has started. So I think tracking it under an issue under diagnostics makes sense to me.
Who wants to paste that in? And Mateus, can you do that?
Yep, already done.
Perfect.
Okay. That was everything on our agenda. Anybody have anything else?
I guess I'll just comment. I'm still working on putting together sort of a high-level blog, and then the parts that I have in terms of the follow-ons from the summit. So still working on that, and hope to pull it together once I finish that, and everybody else finishes the other sections as well.
Yeah, ping us if you've got something that is shareable. So
yep.
Okay. Anything from anybody else? Nothing? Nobody? All right. We're done. I'm going to stop the YouTube. We have one viewer on YouTube. I'm going to stop the broadcast.
Okay.